The evening shadows stretched long across the empty auditorium as the janitor pushed his cleaning cart between the rows of vacant seats. The wheels squeaked slightly against the polished floor, the only sound in the quiet space that would soon be filled with music and applause. The man moved with the efficient pace of someone who had cleaned these floors hundreds of times before, his movements almost automatic as his mind wandered elsewhere. At 42, his hands told stories that his quiet demeanor kept hidden. Calluses from years of manual labor marked his palms. The simple gold wedding band on his left hand had grown slightly loose over the past 3 years, but he couldn't bring himself to resize it. Some empty spaces weren't meant to be filled. The community center's grand auditorium hosted everything from school plays to professional musicians. Tonight, it would welcome a charity concert to raise funds for the local music education program. The janitor had been asked to make sure everything sparkled before the performers arrived. Management always stressed the importance of first impressions, especially when wealthy donors would be attending. His name tag read Tom, though most people who passed him in the hallways rarely looked closely enough to notice. He was part of the background of their lives, the man who emptied trash cans and mopped spills, who fixed leaky faucets and changed light bulbs in hard-to-reach places. The invisible workforce that kept everything running smoothly. Tom checked his watch. His 10-year-old daughter was staying with his sister-in-law tonight so he could work late preparing for the event. He missed having dinner with her, missed hearing about her day at school and her endless questions about the world. She was growing up too fast, her curious mind and gentle spirit reminding him so much of her mother, that sometimes it hurt to look at her. The stage needed attention next. Tom pushed his cart up the side ramp and began to sweep, collecting dropped programs and forgotten items from the previous day's rehearsal. The grand piano stood majestically at center stage, its polished black surface reflecting the dim work lights above. It was a beautiful instrument, a Steinway that had been donated to the community center 5 years ago by a generous benefactor. Tom approached it with reverence, pulling a soft microfiber cloth from his supplies. Even after all these years, he still felt a flutter of something like nervousness when touching such a fine instrument. He carefully wiped dust from its surface, working methodically around the lid and legs, making sure to get into every crevice. Life hadn't always been about cleaning and making ends meet. There had been a time long ago, it seemed now, when Tom had dreamed of playing on stages much like this one. As a teenager, he'd shown real promise at the piano. His high school music teacher had even helped him apply for college scholarships. But then his father had gotten sick, and there was no money or time for music school. Reality had replaced dreams. Responsibility had trumped passion. His daughter was showing the same interest in music now. Her piano teacher said she had natural talent, an ear for melody and rhythm that couldn't be taught. Tom worked extra shifts on weekends to pay for those lessons. Some dreams, he had decided, shouldn't be postponed. The piano now dust-free, Tom stood back to admire its elegant lines. The performers wouldn't arrive for another 2 hours. The chairs were arranged, the floors were clean, the bathrooms were stocked. He was ahead of schedule. An idea flickered at the edges of his mind, both tempting and terrifying. No one was around. No one would know. Tom glanced toward the doors at the back of the auditorium, confirming he was completely alone. The building's admin staff had all gone home, and security only patrolled the outside perimeter this early in the evening. He carefully set aside his cleaning supplies and approached the piano again, this time with different intentions. His heart pounded as he slowly lowered himself onto the bench. How long had it been since he'd actually sat at a piano, let alone played one? His daughter's starter keyboard at home didn't count. That was her instrument, and he only touched it to help her practice. He adjusted the bench slightly, muscle memory guiding him to the right distance from the keys. His hands hovered above them, trembling slightly. For a moment, doubt clouded his mind. This was foolish. He was out of practice. He should get back to work, but something stronger than doubt held him there. A hunger that 15 years of practical living hadn't managed to satisfy completely. Music had been his first love, before marriage, before fatherhood, before grief. It had been his voice when words failed him, his comfort in lonely times. Tom placed his fingers gently on the cool ivory keys. They felt both foreign and familiar, like meeting an old friend after decades apart. He pressed one key, then another, the notes hanging in the empty air. A simple C major scale first, his fingers remembering where to go despite the years away. The sound was so much richer than he remembered, so much more alive than the electric keyboard he'd pawned during the hard months after his wife's illness. Each note seemed to vibrate through him, awakening something that had been dormant for too long. Encouraged, Tom closed his eyes and began to play something more substantial, Debussy's Clair de Lune, a piece he had once known by heart. The opening notes were hesitant, and he fumbled a few transitions. But as the music began to flow, years of restraint melted away. His shoulders relaxed, his breathing deepened, and the music grew more confident. The piece spoke of moonlight on water, of beauty and tranquility. As Tom played, he thought of nights when he and his wife would sit on their small apartment balcony, looking at the stars and dreaming of the future. He thought of his daughter asleep in her bed, her small face peaceful in the glow of her nightlight. He poured all of it into the music. The joy, the pain, the love, the loss. Memories flooded back as his fingers moved across the keys. His first recital at 12 years old, sweating in an uncomfortable suit. The summer he worked 2 jobs to buy his first upright piano. The night he played for his future wife on their second date, her eyes wide with surprise and admiration. The lullabies he composed when his daughter was a colicky infant, trying to soothe her while her mother caught precious moments of sleep. The music carried him away from the empty auditorium, away from the cleaning cart and the name tag and the bills waiting at home. For these moments he was just a man playing piano, not a widower, not a struggling single father, not an invisible worker. Just a human being expressing something true through music. As the final notes of Debussy faded, Tom didn't stop. His hands moved naturally into another piece, Chopin's Nocturne Op. 9, No. 2. He made mistakes, of course. His technique was rusty, his timing occasionally off. But there was something in his playing that technical perfection couldn't capture. Raw emotion, lived experience. A heart speaking directly through fingers to keys. The Nocturne's gentle melody filled the auditorium, bouncing off the high ceiling and empty seats. In his mind, Tom saw an audience of memories, all the people and moments that had shaped him. His mother, who had scraped together money for his first piano lessons. His father, who had never quite understood his passion but supported it anyway. His wife, whose encouragement had kept his music alive even when there was no time to play. He didn't hear the back door of the auditorium open, didn't notice the figure standing in the shadows listening. Tom was completely absorbed in the music, reconnected with a part of himself he had thought was lost forever. His work shirt was wrinkled. His hands were chapped from cleaning chemicals, but as he played, he was transformed. The piece built to its gentle climax, Tom's body swaying slightly with the emotion of it. Then, as the final phrases approached, he let the music soften, becoming almost a whisper. The last notes hung in the air like a question left unanswered, a story without an ending. In the silence that followed, Tom felt a strange sense of peace. Even if he never played again, he had this moment, this reconnection with the person he might have been, this reminder that beneath the layers of duty and routine, his passion still lived. He opened his eyes, ready to return to reality, to put away the dream again and pick up his cleaning supplies. But the silence was broken by a sound he wasn't expecting, the slow, deliberate clapping of a single pair of hands. Tom's head snapped up, his moment of tranquility shattered by embarrassment and alarm. Someone had been listening. Someone had witnessed this private rebellion, this secret indulgence. His hands flew from the keys as if they had suddenly become hot to the touch. He nearly knocked over the bench in his haste to stand. A figure was walking down the center aisle toward the stage, still applauding. As they stepped into the light, Tom could see it was a woman in elegant concert attire. With a sinking feeling, he realized this must be one of the performers for tonight's event, arrived early to practice. His face burned with shame. He was the janitor, not a musician. He had no right to touch the instruments, let alone play them without permission. He would likely be reported, perhaps even fired. How would he explain that to his daughter? How would he pay for her lessons then? "Please," the woman said, her voice echoing slightly in the large space. "Please don't stop on my account." That was truly extraordinary. Tom stood frozen on the stage, caught between worlds, unsure of what would happen next. The woman approaching the stage moved with the confidence of someone completely at home in performance spaces. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and her formal black concert attire suggested she was not just any musician, but likely one of the headliners for tonight's charity event. Tom's stomach tightened with anxiety. He quickly stepped away from the piano. "I'm sorry," he said, reaching for his cleaning supplies. "I know I shouldn't have touched the instruments. I was just finishing up here." The woman stopped at the edge of the stage, looking up at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. There was surprise there, but not anger. "Curiosity, perhaps. Are you apologizing for that performance?" she asked, her voice carrying easily in the acoustics of the auditorium. "Because that would be like apologizing for showing someone a sunrise." Tom blinked, confused by her reaction. He had expected a reprimand, maybe even a complaint to his supervisor. Not praise? He didn't know how to respond, so he fell back on what he knew best, explaining his work. "I'm just the janitor," he said, gesturing to his cart. "I was getting the place ready for tonight's event. Everything else is done, the bathrooms are stocked, the floors are clean. I was just about to finish up the stage area." The woman climbed the side steps to join him on stage, her heels clicking against the hardwood. Up close, he could see she was probably in her mid-50s, with laugh lines around her eyes and a certain intensity to her gaze that made it difficult to look away. "My name is Lynn," she said, offering her hand. "I'm playing the second half of tonight's concert." Tom hesitantly shook her hand, acutely aware of his work clothes and the cleaning chemicals that had dried his skin. "I'm Tom," he replied. "I work nights here at the community center. And apparently you play Debussy and Chopin when you think no one is listening," Lynn said, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. She moved past him to the piano, running her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them. "How long have you been playing?" Tom shifted uncomfortably. It felt strange to be having this conversation, to be seen in this unexpected way by a stranger. "I used to play a lot, but not much anymore. Just help my kid practice sometimes." "Your child is learning piano too?" Lynn asked, seeming genuinely interested. Tom nodded, a small smile breaking through his discomfort. "My daughter, she's 10, takes lessons twice a week after school. Her teacher says she's got real talent." "Like father, like daughter," Lynn observed. She sat down at the piano bench and played a quick scale, her fingers moving with practiced precision. "You know, it takes most students years to play Chopin's nocturnes with any real feeling. You've clearly had training." Tom felt a complicated mix of pride and embarrassment at her words. It had been so long since anyone had acknowledged this part of him, this old dream that he'd tucked away like childhood toys in an attic. "I studied until I was about 18, he admitted. "Had plans for music school, but life had other ideas." Lynn nodded thoughtfully. "Life often does." She stood up from the bench and checked her watch. "I came early to practice, but now I'm curious about your story. Would you join me for a coffee in the green room? The caterers always set up a spread for the performers hours before we arrive." Tom hesitated. He still had work to finish, and fraternizing with the performers definitely wasn't in his job description. "I should really complete my rounds," he said. "My supervisor will be checking." "Of course," Lynn said, taking a small notebook from her purse. She scribbled something and handed him a page. "Here's my number. If you finish early and change your mind, I'll be here until the show. I'd love to hear more about your musical background." Tom took the paper automatically, surprised by the turn the evening had taken. He tucked it into his pocket, certain he wouldn't use it but not wanting to be rude. "I should let you practice," he said, gathering his cleaning supplies. "And I need to finish the rest of the building before people start arriving." Lynn nodded. "Of course. It was a pleasure to meet you, Tom. Truly." As he pushed his cart off the stage and through the side exit, Tom could hear Lynn beginning her warm-up exercises, her fingers dancing through complicated scales and arpeggios with a speed and precision that made his earlier playing seem amateurish by comparison. Yet there had been no condescension in her manner, no professional disdain for his rusty skills. Just genuine appreciation and curiosity. The rest of his shift passed in a blur of routine tasks, but his mind kept returning to those moments at the piano and the unexpected audience of one. As he emptied trash cans and wiped down water fountains, his fingers sometimes twitched with phantom melodies. Muscle memory awakened after its long dormancy. By the time he finished his rounds, the community center was coming alive with activity. Catering staff arranged refreshments in the lobby. Volunteer ushers in black and white attire reviewed their seating charts. The technical crew adjusted lights and tested microphones on stage. Tom changed into his street clothes in the small employee locker room, trading his work uniform for worn jeans and a clean flannel shirt. He should go home now. His sister-in-law would be putting his daughter to bed soon, reading her the chapter book she loved. If he hurried, he might catch the goodnight ritual, maybe even take over the reading himself. But as he headed for the exit, his feet seemed to have other ideas. Instead of turning left toward the parking lot, he found himself walking right back toward the auditorium. Just to check, he told himself. Just to make sure everything was still in order before the guests arrived. The backstage area was busy now. Performers in formal attire chatted in small groups. Stagehands moved purposefully between tasks. No one paid any attention to Tom. He was just another nondescript figure in the organized chaos of pre-show preparations. The green room door was propped open, revealing a spread of finger sandwiches, fruit, and drinks on a table inside. Tom hesitated at the threshold, feeling like an intruder. But then he spotted Lynn sitting alone in a corner chair, reviewing sheet music with intense concentration. Without looking up, she gestured to the empty seat beside her as if she'd been expecting him. "I was hoping you'd come back," she said as he reluctantly sat down. "I was just going over my program for tonight." Tom glanced at the complex musical notations on the pages. "What will you be playing?" "Beethoven's Pathetique Sonata, then some Schubert and Liszt after the intermission." She set the music aside and looked at him directly. "But I've been thinking about you since our encounter earlier." Tom shifted uncomfortably. "I really shouldn't be here. I'm not part of the performance." "That's precisely what I wanted to talk to you about," Lynn said, leaning forward slightly. "The pianist who was supposed to open our show called this morning with laryngitis. He was going to play and then introduce a group of students from the music education program, the very program this fundraiser is supporting." Tom could sense where this conversation was heading and quickly tried to redirect it. "That's unfortunate, but I'm sure one of the other professionals can cover the opening." Lynn shook her head. "Everyone already has their program set. And besides, I had an idea that I think would be much more powerful." She paused, her eyes intent on his face. "Would you consider playing one piece to open our show?" The request hit Tom like a physical blow. He actually leaned back in his chair, his heart suddenly racing. That's crazy. I can't do that. I haven't performed in front of people since high school. I was just fooling around earlier. I made mistakes all over the place." "Yes, there were technical errors," Lynn acknowledged with a calm honesty that was somehow not offensive. "But there was also something in your playing that many technically perfect pianists spend their entire careers trying to achieve. Genuine emotional expression. You played like someone who has lived, who has known joy and sorrow and everything in between." Tom shook his head, unable to process her words. "I'm the janitor here." People would be confused. It would be weird. Would it? Lynn challenged gently. "Tonight is about showing how music can transform lives. It's about raising money so children who otherwise couldn't afford lessons can experience the power of music education. What better demonstration of that power than someone who has kept music in his heart through all of life's challenges?" "I don't even have anything to wear," Tom protested weakly. "No suit, no formal clothes." Lynn waved her hand dismissively. "Our cellist's husband is about your size. He always brings an extra dress shirt and jacket to performances. He spilled coffee on himself before every concert for 20 years. It's become his ritual," she smiled, somewhat superstitious but convenient in this case. Tom ran a hand through his hair, feeling cornered yet strangely tempted. "What would I even play? I don't have anything prepared. I haven't practiced seriously in years. What about the Chopin nocturne you were playing earlier? It sounded like it was still very much in your fingers." Lynn's expression softened. "One piece, Tom. 5 minutes of your time to potentially change how these donors see the impact of music education. 5 minutes that might help fund scholarships for kids like your daughter." At the mention of his daughter, Tom felt something shift inside him. What would she think if she knew he had turned down this opportunity? What message would that send about following dreams, about having the courage to take chances? She was working so hard at her own musical journey. How could he expect her to be brave if he wasn't willing to be? "My daughter doesn't even know I used to play seriously," he said quietly. "She thinks I just know enough to help her practice." Lynn's eyebrows raised slightly. "Then perhaps it's time she found out there's more to her father than she realizes." Tom sat in silence for a long moment, internal arguments raging. The practical side of him listed all the reasons this was a terrible idea: potential humiliation, lack of preparation, the discomfort of being thrust into a spotlight he hadn't sought. But another part of him, a part that had been quiet for too long, whispered that maybe, just maybe, this was a door opening that he shouldn't be so quick to close. "If I did this," he said finally, each word feeling like it was being pulled from deep inside him, "what would I need to do?" Lynn's face lit up at Tom's tentative agreement. She quickly outlined what would happen. He would play one piece as the opening act, just before she introduced the student musicians who would perform a short demonstration. The whole thing would take less than 5 minutes. She would introduce him not as the janitor, but simply as a local pianist with a personal connection to music education. "The show starts in an hour," Lynn said, checking her watch. "That gives us enough time to get you ready and run through your piece once on stage." Before Tom could reconsider, Lynn was guiding him through the backstage area, introducing him to key people with a smooth confidence that left no room for questions about who he was or why he was suddenly part of the program. A stage manager handed him a printed program with his name hastily added in pen. A wardrobe assistant produced the promised dress shirt and jacket, showing him to a small changing area. Alone for a moment, Tom stared at himself in the mirror as he buttoned the borrowed shirt. The face looking back at him seemed both familiar and strange. The same eyes that had watched his life unfold over 42 years, but now filled with a nervous energy he hadn't experienced in decades. Was he really going to do this? Play piano on stage in front of an audience of strangers? He thought about calling his sister-in-law, telling his daughter to come to the community center right away. But no. If he failed, if he froze up or played terribly, he didn't want her to witness it. Better to see how it went first. If it was a disaster, she need never know it happened. When he emerged in his borrowed clothes, Lynn was waiting. She looked him over and nodded approvingly. "Much better. Now let's get you to the piano for a quick warm-up before the audience arrives." The stage looked different now, transformed by professional lighting and the shining black grand piano at its center. Tom approached it cautiously, feeling like an imposter in his dress clothes. The auditorium seats were still empty, but stagehands and technicians moved about preparing for the event. A sound technician approached him with a small microphone. "For your introduction," the young woman explained, clipping it to his lapel, "just say your name and what you'll be playing when Ms. Lynn introduces you. Then you can sit down and begin." Tom nodded mutely, his throat suddenly dry. The technician adjusted something on her tablet. "Can you say something so I can check the levels? I'll be playing Chopin," Tom managed, his voice sounding strange to his own ears. The technician nodded, satisfied, and moved away. Lynn appeared at his side, gesturing to the piano. "Take a few minutes to get comfortable," she said. "Play through your piece once. Get a feel for this particular instrument." Tom sat down at the bench, adjusting its height with trembling hands. The keys looked impossibly white under the stage lights, the black ones gleaming like polished stone. He placed his fingers on the keyboard, took a deep breath, and began to play the opening measures of the nocturne. The sound that filled the auditorium was richer than before, amplified by the professional acoustics and his own heightened awareness. Tom stumbled slightly in the third measure, his anxiety interfering with the muscle memory. He stopped, took another breath, and started again, forcing himself to focus only on the music and not on what lay ahead. This time, the piece flowed more smoothly. Not perfect. There were still hesitations and small errors, but the essential spirit of the music was there. As he played the final chord, he heard applause from the wings. Lynn stood watching him, a satisfied expression on her face. "That was lovely," she said. "Don't worry about the small mistakes. No performance is ever perfect, not even for professionals. Just remember to breathe and let the music speak through you like you did before." A voice came over the intercom system. 30 minutes to doors opening." Lynn squeezed his shoulder reassuringly. "I need to finish my own preparations. The stage manager will let you know when it's time. Just wait in the green room until then." Left alone, Tom wandered back to the green room, too nervous to sit. Other performers were gathered there now, chatting casually or doing quiet warm-up exercises. A cellist ran through silent fingering patterns. A violinist closed her eyes in meditation. No one paid much attention to Tom, just another performer preparing in his own way. He paced the small room, rubbing his hands together, occasionally flexing his fingers. Doubt crept in with every passing minute. What had he been thinking agreeing to this? He wasn't a performer anymore. He was a janitor, a single dad, a man who had put away childish dreams long ago in favor of practical reality. But another voice inside him argued back. Was it so childish to love music? To want to share that love with others? To show that passion doesn't die just because life takes unexpected turns? His thoughts were interrupted by a young stagehand at the door. 5 minutes, everyone. Audience is seated. Tom peered through the curtains at the side of the stage. The auditorium was now filled with people in formal attire, local business owners, wealthy donors, arts patrons, and music teachers. His anxiety spiked as he scanned the crowd. So many people, so many eyes that would be watching him, judging him. Remember why we're here, a voice said beside him. It was Lynn, resplendent now in a formal concert gown. It's not about being perfect. It's about showing them the power of music to remain in our lives, even when circumstances change. Before Tom could respond, the house lights dimmed. A spotlight illuminated the center of the stage, where a podium stood next to the grand piano. The audience quieted as the director of the community center walked out to welcome everyone. After a brief introduction about the importance of music education and the purpose of the evening's fundraiser, the director introduced Lynn as the evening's featured performer. Applause filled the auditorium as Lynn walked confidently to the podium. Thank you all for coming tonight to support music education in our community, Lynn began, her voice warm and engaging. Before we hear from our student performers, I have a special addition to our program. Tom's heart hammered in his chest. This was it. No turning back now. Earlier today, I had an unexpected encounter that perfectly illustrates why we're all here, Lynn continued. I arrived early to practice and discovered someone playing this very piano with such genuine emotion that I was stopped in my tracks. The audience murmured with interest. Lynn smiled and gestured toward the wings where Tom stood frozen. This gentleman hasn't performed publicly in many years. Life took him in different directions, but music remained in his heart as it does for so many of us. Tonight he's agreed to share that passion with us, reminding us all why music education matters, because the seeds planted in childhood continue to bloom throughout our lives, even when we think no one is watching. Please welcome Tom to the stage. The spotlight swung to the side, finding Tom in the wings. A smattering of uncertain applause began as he forced his legs to carry him forward. The light was blinding, making the audience a sea of indistinct shapes beyond its glare. In some ways, that made it easier. He couldn't make out individual faces watching him. He reached the podium, leaned toward the microphone, and managed to say, "Good evening. I'll be playing Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major." His voice sounded steadier than he felt. As he crossed to the piano and sat down, Tom's mind went curiously blank. The paralyzing fear he'd expected was replaced by an odd calm. He adjusted the bench, placed his hands on the keys, and took a deep breath. In the moment before he began to play, time seemed suspended. He thought of his daughter practicing her scales with determined concentration. He thought of his late wife who had loved to listen to him play when they were young. He thought of his own childhood piano teacher, who had believed in him when he didn't believe in himself. Then he began to play. The first notes were tentative, his fingers stiff with nervousness. But as the familiar melody began to take shape, something shifted inside him. The audience faded away. The borrowed clothes, the unfamiliar stage, the years of absence from music, all of it receded into the background. There was only the music now, the gentle, flowing notes of Chopin's Nocturne, rising into the hushed auditorium. Tom's body relaxed into the performance, his touch becoming more assured with each phrase. The piece had always felt to him like a conversation between hope and melancholy, and he leaned into that interpretation, letting the emotional narrative of the music guide his playing. He made mistakes, a few missed notes, some pedaling that wasn't quite clean, but the essence of the piece remained intact. The music breathed through him, connecting him to something, larger than himself, larger than this moment or this auditorium. As he approached the final section of the piece, Tom allowed himself to look up briefly. The spotlight made it hard to see clearly, but movement near the back of the hall caught his eye. Someone was standing in the aisle, a small figure beside a taller one. Even from a distance, even in the dim light, he would recognize his daughter anywhere. His sister-in-law must have brought her after all. Tom felt a moment of panic. What if he messed up now with his child watching? But it quickly transformed into something else. Determination. He wanted her to see that dreams didn't have to die, that passion could survive the hardest times, that her father was more than she knew. With renewed focus, Tom played the final phrases of the nocturne, letting the notes sing out clear and true before fading to a gentle conclusion. For a moment there was complete silence in the auditorium. Then, beginning slowly and building to a wave, applause filled the space. Tom stood somewhat dazed and turned to face the audience. The spotlight still blinded him, but he could hear the approval in their applause. He bowed awkwardly, unused to such attention, and then looked again toward the back of the hall where his daughter stood. Even from this distance, he could see her face shining with surprise and something else. Pride, perhaps, or wonder. She was clapping harder than anyone, bouncing slightly on her toes as she always did when excited. In that moment, Tom knew that whatever happened next, whether this was a one-time performance or the beginning of something new, something important, had already been accomplished. He had shown his daughter that it's never too late to reconnect with the things you love. The applause continued as Tom made his way off the stage, his legs feeling oddly unsteady. Lynn was waiting in the wings, beaming with approval. She squeezed his arm as they passed each other, she heading to the podium to introduce the student performers, he escaping to the relative safety of backstage. "That was beautiful," she whispered. "Wait in the green room. We'll talk after my set." Tom nodded mutely, still processing what had just happened. He'd done it. He'd actually played the piano in front of a proper audience for the first time in over 20 years, and his daughter had seen him. The thought sent a fresh wave of adrenaline through his system. He made his way back to the green room, receiving nods of appreciation from the other performers waiting for their turns. A violinist gave him a thumbs up. The cellist patted him on the shoulder. These small gestures from fellow musicians meant more than they could know. Tom sank into a chair, his hands trembling slightly from the aftermath of nerves and excitement. Through the speakers, he could hear Lynn introducing the students from the local music education program. Young voices filled the auditorium as they performed a simple arrangement of a folk tune. The audience applauded warmly. All Tom could think about was his daughter. She was here. She had seen him play. What was going through her mind right now? Did she understand the significance of what she'd witnessed? He needed to find her, to explain, to see her reaction up close. He slipped out of the green room and made his way through the backstage corridors to the auditorium door. Peering through the small window, he scanned the audience, trying to spot his sister-in-law and daughter. They were seated now near the back, his daughter's face tilted up toward the stage where Lynn had begun her performance of Beethoven. Tom quietly opened the door and slid into the auditorium, staying close to the wall. He made his way to the back row, trying not to disturb anyone. When he was just a few rows behind his family, his daughter sensed his presence and turned. Their eyes met across the darkened space. Her face broke into a grin so wide it seemed to illuminate the dim auditorium. She waved excitedly, then put her finger to her lips in a shushing gesture, conscientious even in her excitement not to disturb the performance. His sister-in-law turned too, giving him a look of amused surprise and a small nod of approval. Tom slid into an empty seat in the back row, content to wait until intermission to speak with them. For now it was enough to watch his daughter as she alternated between watching Lynn's skillful performance and turning to look back at him, as if making sure he was still there, as if he might disappear if she didn't keep checking. Lynn's playing was masterful, her technique flawless, her interpretation of Beethoven both technically precise and emotionally compelling. Tom listened with the ears of someone who understood exactly how difficult it was to achieve that level of artistry. Yet he found himself more moved by the simple folk tunes the students had played, their earnest efforts reminding him of his own early days at the piano. When intermission arrived, the lights came up and his daughter was out of her seat in an instant, practically running to where he sat. She flung herself at him with the unself-conscious enthusiasm of a 10-year-old, nearly knocking him backward. "Dad, you never told me you could play like that." Her voice was filled with wonder and a hint of accusation. "All this time I thought you were just helping me with my homework." Tom hugged her tightly, feeling a lump form in his throat. "I haven't played in a very long time, honey." Not like that, in front of people. His sister-in-law approached more sedately, an amused expression on her face. Well, that explains why you were so insistent she take piano lessons, she said. You might have mentioned you were a secret virtuoso. Hardly a virtuoso, Tom laughed, feeling slightly embarrassed. Just someone who used to play a lot and hasn't completely forgotten how. But you were amazing. His daughter insisted, pulling back to look at him. Ms. Chen is always telling me to play with feeling, and I never really understood what she meant until I heard you tonight. You looked so different up there. Tom was touched by her observation. Different how? She considered this seriously, her forehead creasing in thought. Like you were telling a story without words. Like you were somewhere else, but also more here than normal. She frowned, frustrated by her inability to express exactly what she meant. You know what I mean? I know exactly what you mean, Tom assured her. That's what music does when it's working right. It takes you somewhere else while keeping you absolutely in the moment. Is that why you wanted me to learn piano? She asked. So I could feel like that too? The question caught Tom off guard. He had encouraged her interest in music, certainly, but had he pushed for piano specifically? Perhaps unconsciously he had, wanting to pass along the one thing that had once meant so much to him. I wanted you to have the chance to find out if music could be important to you, he said carefully. The way it was for me when I was younger. Why did you stop? She asked with the direct curiosity of childhood. If you loved it so much, why did you stop playing? His sister-in-law intervened gently. That might be a conversation for another time. The second half will be starting soon. But Tom shook his head. It's okay. He looked at his daughter. I stopped because life got complicated. Your grandfather got sick when I was about to go to music school. I needed to work to help pay for his medical bills. Then I met your mom and we had you, and working 2 jobs didn't leave much time for practicing piano. Do you regret it? His daughter asked quietly. Not going to music school? Tom considered the question carefully. It would be easy to give a pat answer, to say that of course he didn't regret anything that led to having her in his life. And that would be true, but it would also be an oversimplification. I regret that I let music slip away completely. He said finally, I should have found ways to keep it in my life, even if I couldn't pursue it professionally. But I don't regret the choices I made for our family. His daughter nodded, seeming satisfied with this answer. Are you going to play more now? Like in concerts and stuff? Tom laughed. I doubt I'll be doing many concerts. Tonight was a special situation. But you could practice again, she insisted. We could practice together. I could show you what Ms. Chen is teaching me, and you could show me how to play like you did tonight. The idea of sharing music with his daughter in this new way, not just as a parent helping with practice, but as 2 people pursuing the same passion, filled Tom with unexpected joy. I'd like that, he said softly. I'd like that very much. The lights dimmed, signaling the end of intermission. His sister-in-law touched his arm. We should get back to our seats. Will you join us? Tom shook his head. I should go back to the green room. Lynn, Miss Wei wanted to speak with me after her performance. His daughter's eyes widened. You know Ms. Wei? She's famous. Ms. Chen has all her recordings and makes us listen to them in group class. I just met her today, Tom admitted. She's the one who convinced me to play tonight. Tell her I think she's amazing, his daughter whispered as she headed back to her seat with his sister-in-law. Almost as amazing as you, she added with a grin. Tom returned to the green room, his heart lighter than it had been in years. The conversation with his daughter had unlocked something he'd kept carefully sealed away. The possibility that music could still be part of his life. That it wasn't too late to reclaim this piece of himself. The second half of the concert passed in a blur. Tom watched from the wings as Lynn performed her Schubert and Liszt selections with flawless technique and profound musicality. The audience responded with enthusiastic applause, giving her a standing ovation at the conclusion. As the attendees moved to the reception area for refreshments and the chance to donate to the Music Education Fund, Lynn sought Tom out backstage. There you are, she said warmly. I was beginning to think you'd run away. Tom shook his head. My daughter and sister-in-law were in the audience. I spent the intermission with them. Ah, so that's who I saw in the back. She looks like you around the eyes, Lynn smiled. What did she think of her father's performance? She was surprised, Tom admitted. I've never really told her about my background with piano. She just knew I could help her with her lessons. And now? Lynn asked. And now she wants us to practice together. She thinks I should play concerts and stuff. He laughed softly at the memory of his daughter's enthusiasm. Lynn's expression grew thoughtful. You know, that might not be such a wild idea. Not major concerts, of course, but there are always opportunities for community performances. The library does a lunchtime recital series. Schools need accompanists for choir concerts. She paused, studying his face. Would you consider it? Getting back into music more seriously? Tom hesitated. I don't know. Tonight was special, but I have a full-time job, my daughter to take care of. Music doesn't have to be all or nothing, Lynn said gently. That's the false choice many people think they face. But there's a wide spectrum between concert pianist and someone who never touches a keyboard. The reception coordinator appeared at the door. Ms. Wei, they're asking for you at the donor table. Lynn nodded in acknowledgement. I'll be right there. She turned back to Tom. Think about it. And in the meantime, there's someone I'd like you to meet. She gestured to a well-dressed older man who had been hovering nearby. This is Mr. Phillips, the director of the music education program we're fundraising for tonight. The man stepped forward with a warm smile, offering his hand. That was quite a performance, young man. Lynn tells me you're essentially self-taught after high school. Tom shook his hand, somewhat confused by the man's interest. I had lessons from age 8 to 18. Nothing since then. Mr. Phillips nodded, looking even more intrigued. And your daughter is studying piano now? Yes, twice a week after school. She loves it. Excellent, excellent. Mr. Phillips exchanged a glance with Lynn. I wonder if you might be interested in a conversation about our adult education program. We've been looking to expand it, and someone with your background and life experience might be just the perspective we need. Tom stared at Mr. Phillips, trying to process his words. Adult education program? I don't understand, Mr. Phillips smiled patiently. We've been focused primarily on children's music education, but there's growing interest in adult programs too. People who played as kids and want to return to it, or folks who never had the opportunity but want to learn later in life. He gestured to, Tom, your story working. A day job while keeping music alive in your heart. That resonates with a lot of people. I'm not a teacher, Tom said automatically. I have no qualifications. Formal qualifications aren't everything, Lynn interjected. You have life experience and genuine passion. That combination can be more valuable than a stack of degrees. Tom felt overwhelmed. Too much was happening too quickly. Just hours ago, he had been cleaning the auditorium, a daily routine he could perform almost without thinking. Now he was standing backstage in borrowed clothes, being offered, what exactly, a job? An opportunity? He wasn't even sure. I need some time to think about all this, he said finally. It's been a very unexpected evening. Mr. Phillips nodded understandingly. Of course. Here's my card. Call me next week if you'd like to discuss this further. He shook Tom's hand again. Regardless of what you decide, thank you for your performance tonight. It added something special to our event. As Mr. Phillips walked away to join the reception, Lynn touched Tom's arm. I should go mingle with the donors. Will you be all right? Tom nodded. I'm going to find my daughter and head home. It's past her bedtime on a school night. Of course. Lynn hesitated, then added, whatever you decide about Mr. Phillips's offer, don't let tonight be the end of your relationship with music. You have a gift that shouldn't be hidden away. Tom thanked her sincerely, then made his way back to the auditorium where his daughter and sister-in-law were waiting. His daughter bounced with excitement, full of questions about the concert, the performers, and most of all, when they could start practicing piano together. Maybe this weekend, Tom promised as they walked to the parking lot. We'll see what pieces we both know and can play together. His sister-in-law gave him a questioning look over his daughter's head, clearly wondering about the borrowed formal clothes and his unexpected appearance on stage. I'll explain everything later, he mouthed to her. She nodded, then said her goodbyes, leaving father and daughter to drive home together. As they drove through the quiet nighttime streets, his daughter couldn't stop talking about the concert. Ms. Chen is going to be so surprised when I tell her my dad played with Ms. Wei. Can I tell her, please? I didn't exactly play with Ms. Wei, Tom corrected gently. I just played before her set. Still, his daughter was practically bouncing in her seat. You were on the same program. Your name will be in the same program book as hers. That's so cool, Dad! Tom couldn't help but smile at her enthusiasm. Yes, you can tell Ms. Chen if you want to. And can we get our piano tuned? The one at home? It's always a little flat on the high notes, and now that you're going to play again, we should get it fixed up, right? The old upright piano in their apartment had been his wife's, a yard sale find that they'd moved from apartment to apartment over the years. It wasn't a great instrument, but it had sentimental value, and it was good enough for a beginning student. He hadn't really played it much himself in recent years, just enough to help his daughter with her lessons. We'll see about getting it tuned, he promised. It's not a bad idea. By the time they arrived home, his daughter's energy was finally flagging. The excitement of the unexpected evening was giving way to the reality of it being well past her usual bedtime. Tom helped her through her nighttime routine, listening as she continued to talk about the concert between brushing her teeth and changing into pajamas. "Dad," she said as he tucked her into bed, her voice now serious in the way children sometimes are when they're very tired. "Why didn't you ever tell me you could play like that?" Tom sat on the edge of her bed considering how to answer. "I guess I didn't want you to feel any pressure about your own playing. I wanted you to discover music in your own way, not because it was important to me." She considered this. "But it is important to you, isn't it? I could tell by the way you looked when you were playing." "Yes," he admitted. "It was very important to me once, and maybe it can be again in a different way." "Different how?" "Well, when I was young, I thought being a musician meant being a professional performer or nothing at all. Now I'm wondering if there might be a middle path, keeping music in my life without it having to be my whole identity." His daughter nodded sleepily. "Like how I love soccer, but I also love piano. I don't have to pick just one, right?" Tom smiled at her simple wisdom. "Exactly like that. Now get some sleep, okay? We both have early mornings tomorrow." After she fell asleep, Tom sat in the living room, staring at the old upright piano in the corner. The events of the evening played through his mind on repeat. The feeling of performing again, the audience's response, his daughter's pride, and the unexpected offer from Mr. Phillips. He opened the piano bench and sorted through the music books inside. Most were his daughter's lesson books, but buried beneath them were a few of his old scores. Chopin, Debussy, Beethoven, composers he had loved in his youth. He pulled out the Chopin nocturnes and set the book on the piano rack. It was too late to play now. The neighbors would complain, but he sat at the bench anyway, resting his fingers on the silent keys, feeling the familiar position of his hands on the keyboard. Tomorrow, he decided. Tomorrow after work, he would play again. 6 months later, Tom stood in the community center's smaller recital hall, watching as his adult students prepared for their first informal recital. The room was filled with family and friends, a much less intimidating setting than the main auditorium, where he had played that fateful night. His new role as an instructor in the adult education program had started small, just one evening class a week, teaching basics to beginners, but word had spread quickly. There was something about his approach that resonated with adult learners. He didn't focus on technical perfection or traditional pedagogy. Instead, he emphasized the emotional connection to music, the joy of playing regardless of skill level. "I'm so nervous," confessed one of his students, a woman in her 60s who had always wanted to learn piano but never had the opportunity as a child. "What if I mess up?" "Then you'll be in good company," Tom assured her with a smile. "Every pianist in history has messed up at some point. The music isn't about perfection. It's about expression. Just tell your story through the keys like we practiced." His daughter sat in the front row, beaming with pride. At 11 now, she had made remarkable progress in her own playing over the past months. Their weekend practice sessions had become a cherished ritual, sometimes with her teaching him pieces from her lessons, sometimes with him sharing techniques from his own experience. The old upright at home had been tuned, and Tom had slowly begun rebuilding his repertoire, practicing in the evenings after his daughter went to bed. There were days when his fingers felt stiff and uncooperative, when the demands of work and single parenthood left him too tired to play. But more and more, music had reclaimed its place in his life, not as the all-consuming passion of his youth, but as a steady companion that enriched his days. Mr. Phillips appeared at Tom's side. "Ready for your first student recital as a teacher?" Tom nodded, feeling a mixture of nervousness and excitement not unlike what he'd experienced before his own performance. "I think they're as ready as they'll ever be. And you? Are you ready for your own performance?" The library series is a great opportunity. Lynn had recommended Tom for an upcoming lunchtime recital at the public library, a small, casual performance series that featured local musicians. It would be his first planned public performance in decades, a step he hadn't imagined taking 6 months ago. One thing at a time, Tom said with a smile. Let's get through today first. As he made his way to the front of the room to welcome everyone to the recital, Tom caught his daughter's eye. She gave him a thumbs up, her face radiating confidence in him. In that moment, he felt a profound sense of gratitude for the unexpected turns his life had taken. The path hadn't been what he'd imagined as a young man with dreams of concert halls and recording contracts. The reality had been messier, more complicated, filled with detours and unexpected challenges. But standing here now, about to introduce his adult students, people who, like him, had found or rediscovered music later in life, he couldn't imagine being anywhere else. Welcome, everyone, he began, his voice steady and warm. Thank you for coming to share this special day with us. Each person you'll hear today has their own unique story. Some played as children and are returning to the piano after many years away. Others are fulfilling a lifelong wish to learn. What they all have in common is courage. The courage to try something new, to be beginners again, to share a piece of themselves through music. He glanced again at his daughter, who was listening with rapt attention. Someone very wise once told me that music doesn't have to be all or nothing. There's room for it in everyone's life, in whatever form works for you. Today is a celebration of that idea, that it's never too late to welcome music back into your heart. As his first student made her way nervously to the piano, Tom stepped back, feeling a deep sense of rightness. Life rarely followed a straight or expected path. Sometimes the most beautiful melodies emerged from the most unexpected detours, and sometimes when you thought a dream was lost forever, it was really just waiting patiently for its moment to be heard again.